Have you ever wondered how a single act of kindness could change to lives forever? This is the story of an unlikely hero with 4 paws and a heart of gold. The sun beat down mercilessly that afternoon, the air heavy and shimmering above the empty street. Asphalt glowed with heat, cicadas buzzed faintly, and not a single breeze stirred. At the far end of the block, an old blue sedan sat crookedly against the curb, its paint faded and worn. From a distance, the car looked abandoned, but a small, ragged dog stood beside it. He was thin, with fur matted in patches and ribs showing beneath his coat. His name unknown to the world was Max. For years he had lived on scraps, surviving on luck and instinct. Yet now he did something no one expected. He stood upright on his hind legs. Front paws pressed together, trembling like a child begging to be heard. His amber eyes were fixed on the car window. Inside, unseen to passers-by, an elderly woman named Margaret Wilson slumped over the steering wheel, suffocating in the sealed car. Max whimpered and scratched at the door, circling and returning, repeating the same desperate gesture. But most people walked by. A jogger glanced once, muttered about strays, and kept going. A mother pushing a stroller barely slowed. To them, Max was nothing unusual. Then someone stopped. A man named David Chen, carrying a briefcase, frowned at the odd sight. Something in Max's trembling stance tugged at him. Against his hesitation, he crouched, shading his eyes to peer inside. His heart jolted. Margaret's face was flushed crimson, sweat pouring down her chin, her chest rising only faintly. She was dying. David dropped his briefcase and shouted, "Help, someone please." The women rushed over Sarah Lopez, a nurse, and Emily Taylor, a teacher. They yanked at the locked doors, pounded on the glass, but nothing. Margaret didn't move. Max barked now, urgent and sharp, circling the car in panic. "There's no time," Sarah said, spotting a rock. With one swing, the window shattered, heat pouring out like fire. They pulled Margaret from the seat, her skin burning to the touch, her breathing shallow. David called emergency services, his hands shaking. Max pressed his nose to Margaret's limp hand, whining low, refusing to leave. Minutes later, sirens cut the silence. Paramedics rushed in, fitting an oxygen mask, dousing her skin with cool water. One of them glanced at Max. "Did this dog find her?" David nodded. If not for him, no one would have stopped. Margaret was lifted into the ambulance. Max barked desperately, tail low, as if begging to go along. The doors closed, the sirens faded, but Max stayed rooted to the spot. He would not leave. That evening at City General Hospital, Margaret stirred awake. Confusion blurred her eyes until she saw a small shape curled at the foot of her bed. Max, filthy, trembling, but still there. Margaret's cracked lips moved. You stayed." Her frail hand reached out. Max pressed his head into it, tail wagging faintly, eyes closing in relief. Nurses exchanged glances but said nothing. It was clear this dog hadn't just saved a life, he had chosen one. Days passed. Margaret grew stronger, and Max never left her side. He lay quietly by the bed, followed nurses when they wheeled Margaret to tests, and returned faithfully. David visited, bringing food for Max, amazed by the bond that had formed. One evening, Margaret stroked the dog's rough fur. "Lost my husband last year," she whispered. "The house has been so empty. I thought maybe I'd be next, but you gave me a reason to keep breathing." Her eyes shone with tears. "You're not a stray anymore. You're mine, and I'm yours." When Margaret was discharged, David drove her home. Max leapt into the car without hesitation. The small apartment on Oak Street, once silent, filled with new life. Margaret cleaned Max's fur, set out food and water, and spread a blanket for him. Max, of course, preferred curling up right beside the bed. Neighbors soon noticed. The old woman once seen walking alone was now joined by a scruffy but proud companion. Children called Max's name, eager to meet the hero dog. Strangers stopped Margaret in shops and parks, asking about the story that had begun to spread. Margaret always smiled and answered the same. "I was saved by a miracle. His name is Max." Months passed. Margaret's health improved and Max thrived, his coat filling out, his frame stronger. He was no longer forgotten, no longer unwanted. He had found his place in the world. Their bond, born in desperation, became something sacred. Because sometimes, even a stray can give the greatest gift of all, not just saving a life, but giving it meaning again. As autumn turned to winter, Margaret and Max settled into a routine. Every morning they'd take a slow walk through the nearby park, Max patiently matching Margaret's pace. Neighbors would wave, and children would rush to pet the local celebrity. Margaret found herself chatting more, smiling more, feeling connected to her community in a way she hadn't for years. At home, Max became Margaret's constant companion. He'd curl up at her feet as she read or watched television, his presence a comforting warmth. She cooked, he'd sit in the kitchen, tail thumping hopefully for any scraps that might fall. At night, he slept on a plush dog bed beside her, always alert for any sound of distress. David, the man who had stopped that fateful day, became a regular visitor. He'd bring treats for Max and share tea with Margaret, marveling at the change in both of them. "You know," he said one afternoon, "I almost walked by that day. I'm so glad I didn't." Margaret squeezed his hand. "You and Max, you both saved me. Not just my life, but my spirit." As Christmas approached, Margaret decided to host a small gathering, something she hadn't done since her husband passed. She invited David, Sarah, and Emily, the people who had been there that day. The apartment filled with laughter and the smell of baking. Max, wearing a festive bandana, basked in the attention, accepting belly rubs and treats with equal enthusiasm. During the party, Margaret stood up, tapping her glass for attention. "I want to thank you all," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "Not just for being here today, but for that day. You showed me that kindness still exists in this world, Max." She looked down at the dog leaning against her leg. "You showed me that love can come from the most unexpected places." There wasn't a dry eye in the room as they raised their glasses in a toast to second chances and unlikely heroes. As the new year began, Margaret and Max's story spread beyond their neighborhood. A local news station did a feature on them, and soon, animal rescue organizations reached out. Margaret found herself speaking at events, Max, always by her side, advocating for senior pet adoption and the incredible bonds that can form between humans and animals. One spring day, as they sat in the park watching children play, a young couple approached. "Excuse me," the woman said hesitantly, "but are you Margaret? The one with the hero dog?" Margaret smiled, patting Max's head. "We're both heroes to each other, I think." The couple explained that they had been considering adopting an older dog but had been hesitant. "Hearing your story, seeing you two together, it's made us realize what we could be missing." Tears pricked Margaret's eyes as she reached for Max, burying her face in his fur for a moment. "Take the chance," she said softly. "Open your heart. You never know how it might change your life." As the couple walked away, visibly moved, Margaret looked down at Max. His eyes, warm and trusting, met hers. In that moment, she saw not just the scruffy stray who had saved her life, but a reflection of all the love and purpose he had brought into her world. "You know, Max," she whispered, scratching behind his ears, "I think we saved each other." And as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, Margaret and Max headed home, side by side. Two souls, once lost and alone, now intertwined in a bond that proved that sometimes the greatest love stories aren't written in books or shown in movies. Sometimes they're born in moments of desperation, nurtured by compassion, and lived out in the quiet. Everyday moments of two lives forever changed.